Hello.
David decided he's going to introduce himself. David Gordon.
I'm David. This is Michael.
Not Michael Finegold, though.
Not Michael Finegold. Thank you all for coming over. He's got very good things to talk about and questions. And then if you have questions, that's fine too. And that's how we'll start.
Okay, so let's start with a quote I picked up from Brecht. It goes like that. If the lowly do not think about what's low, they will never rise. Does that connect to this piece?
I don't have an answer to that. If the lowly do not think about what's low,
they will never rise.
If to be lowly, if whatever lowly is an economic state or a political state or a psychological state or I don't know which kind of state he means by this lowliness. I can tell you about myself that I come from a background of very little education, very little money, no theater, no museums, no nothing. I am at some point in a family discussion of some difficulty. My brother, the policeman, said, if we were a normal family, we would be having this kind of conversation. And I said, what would make us a normal family? And he said, if you weren't in it. And he was right. That was, I was the kid who drew pictures and read books, and my mother read and my father read, but I was the romantic of all of that. And I was the person, and in a nice, poor Jewish family, I was the oldest son. Sending me to college was really an important thing to do. Simultaneously, it caused further separation than there might have been if I had not gone off and done something else. Wandered into the art department, met a dancer, married a dancer. I mean, everything I did just made the gap grow bigger. So the lowly, I am the lowly, and I recognize my lowliness and
but not your loneliness.
And my loneliness, both of those things. And I think I've been fighting battles forever. I no longer try to convince my father that I'm worth something because he isn't here anymore. But toward the end of his life, I realized at some point I had become the golden son. And I didn't understand how it happened, and I didn't know what to do about it. My father sat at a table with me and talked to me and petted my hand. And I could not figure out what had happened. Something had happened. And I realized in my computer, there's a script. It's now about 16 pages long. And it starts with the line, "So then I became the golden son." And I realize I'm still haunted by trying to convince my father that anything I did would be worth anything.
Now, here is a question that you might want to deal with. I love a statement, I think it was made by George Steiner, who makes this distinction between art and science. In science, any new discovery, any new advancement cancels the previous ones. In the arts, it's a build-on. It's layer on top of layer on top of layer. Art never becomes obsolete the way scientific and technical stuff becomes obsolete automatically when we have a new device. So what do you make of this statement in relationship to your work?
In the play that we're dealing with right now, it interested me to discover the history of this script, which was initially begun as an adaptation of Measure for Measure by Shakespeare, which relates back to a great many other pieces of material prior to Shakespeare that Shakespeare is using as his jumping off point, and various artists. And I have come to understand that the history of what I'm looking, that what I'm looking at has a history, that the history of what I'm looking at matters to me, and that I keep responding to material that already exists, and I don't want to feel holy about it. I, in fact, am ruthless about things I do to it, but it matters that it's there. And one of the things I've discovered about doing some teaching is in the dance world. When I began dancing, I sort of celebrated the idea that dancing went away. You did a performance and it was gone. And I thought that was wonderful. Simultaneously, in order to make a living and have a family, I could do things. I could draw. I could do a lot of things connected to art stuff. So I did a lot of freelance design and display work. And the interesting thing is that also went away. You did it in a store window, and the next week it was gone. You did it in a showroom, and it was replaced. It was last year's something. I loved that. I loved it that everything went away. Except sometime around the age of 50, I suddenly realized I was going to die. And everything was gone, and nobody would know anything about what I did. So I began to make video. I thought that would save me. I could put things on videotape. Now I realize that was useless. None of it is at all useful. So what I have done in the last 6, 7, 8 years is I have taken as a starting off point for anything, any project I'm working on, somebody else's work.
But now here is a question for you to consider a little bit further.
Yeah.
When you pick up a script, select this one versus another one, what makes you go there? The possibility of taking it somewhere else, or the fact that it is a material that you can just present?
No, it's never. When I came to know you at the Guthrie, Jim Lewis at the Guthrie was sending me scripts to read, to think about. And I read everything that he sent, and I realized that I didn't know what to do with any of it. Very particularly, it caused me to try and figure out what might interest me, and I wrote back at some point saying, is there anything in which time doesn't matter, in which the narrative does not necessarily include a kind of naturalistic logic? Can I get rid of?
So you came across Max Frisch?
Well, I came across these villains living in the attic, and this chorus who were firemen.
Well, warning everybody that there are fires around, and there are this
a Greek chorus of firemen
trying to extinguish the fires everywhere.
And I thought, these are, for me, interesting absurdities. This is surreal, not real, and I can play with this. And the thing that I first determined to do in order to play with it, which we worked on together, this script, we worked on together.
The original, whatever original is.
Original.
The play is called Mr. Biederman and the Firebugs.
Right.
And the Firebugs are two sort of gangsters, right from Brecht, who come and take over the household of this middle class, rather well-to-do, decent family. We ended up doing it under the title Firebugs. Michael Finegold did a new translation for us for the Guthrie. And it was not one of the, how should I describe it mildly, not one of the great popular appeal shows that the Guthrie has done, because it was, the only thing that had in common with other successes of the Guthrie was that there were some gangsters there, like in Guys and Dolls.
And also, I determined that the woman, the mother of the household, the father of the household, the gangsters in the attic, and
the maid.
That the actors who played those roles would just keep switching, so that the woman who played the mother became one of the gangsters, the man who played the gangster became the mother, so that the victims and the victimizers traded places at various times during the course of this evening. And the firemen, the chorus of firemen, arrived in a very small fire truck and came out of the floor like a circus act, expelling many, 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 many firemen. And I used the music of a man, I had a pilfered tape that somebody gave me in Holland of a composer named Kagel, K-A-G-E-L, which sounded like circus music, and I used that.
But also very repetitive, and connects with Brecht also, the kind of show for the crowds in a kind of fair or somewhere.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Here I'm going to jump to something, to go to Measure for Measure. Here's a quote which I love in Measure for Measure by Shakespeare, and it goes like that. For those who don't remember or don't know, the Duke Vincenzio in Measure for Measure by Shakespeare disguises as a friar and returns in this city of Vienna, Shakespeare's Vienna. It's a dissolute world in which whores and pimps and the morality is totally destroyed and disintegrates. And at some point, somebody is asking the Duke, who is now appearing as a friar, nobody knows it's a Duke who is the head of this little place, Vienna. The next question is, what news abroad in the world? And his answer is, there is scarce truth enough, alive to make society secure, but security enough to make fellowships accursed. Much upon this riddle runs the wisdom of the world. This news is old enough, yet it is everyday's news. Would you comment on that?
The things that you're asking me to comment on are the things we're all dealing with. I mean, if you're watching the news, this is the comment on our lives at this moment. These are the things that are happening. And one of the things about dealing with this play, I have no background in the theater. If you came to hear how smart I am about the theater, I'm not. I come from the dance world. I stepped into the theater because that woman who became my manager looked at my work for a year in New York and said, "You belong in the theater." And then she called a lot of theaters and got me into the Guthrie. And so suddenly I was in the theater and trying to find out what everybody else already knew. and I've been playing a hard game of catch-up ever since. And this play, when it was handed to me, I wrote something that was produced Estelle Parsons was in it. Estelle Parsons was being the artistic director of Actors Studio. She handed me the script to Roundheads and Pointheads, said, will you do a workshop at the Actors Studio for 8 weeks with Actors Studio actors? Here is Michael Finegold's original script. He did it 30 years ago. It's 90 pages long. It has 60 characters in it. I had no idea what to do with it. She filled the entire studio with actors. Everybody, even one line. There was somebody to do one-line parts. And the thing went on for 4 hours, and at the end of it, I said, well, could I edit it? And she said,
Shakespeare said yes.
Go ahead. And so I did, and since then I've been playing with it, working with it, trying to think about it.
At what point did Brecht get into that?
Brecht's script, Finegold's script of Brecht's, Finegold's translation of Brecht's script is what I used at the Actors Studio. And in the course of it, it seemed to me it was like what was happening in America. And when I was through with the workshop, I put it away because I thought Mr. Bush would never get reelected, and he did get reelected, and so I found the script again and pulled it back out and went back to work on it and found, and because I don't know anything, I went looking for other translations and to see what is anybody else's translation like. And I read many translations, including one that was published in Russia in 1936 by somebody named, translated by somebody named N. Gould Verschoel. And this translation,
which was Brecht's piece you were talking about, right?
And I went back to Michael Finegold with this translation and said, there are certain things that are not here, that are in the other part. And he said, well, they were willing to translate it into English in Russia, but they took anything that didn't follow the party line out. They cut it, he said. They cut these songs particularly, he said. And so I found that in all the versions I was reading, things tilted in various directions. And then I found, most recently, that there is in existence Brecht's rewriting of Measure for Measure, in which there are whole pages in which Brecht has torn out the page of Measure for Measure, pasted it to the top of the page, and is rewriting on the rest of the page. So I thought if he could do it, I could do it. So that's what I've been doing.
You are telling me that you have become a Brechtian.
I think so, or not.
But talking about that, do you feel that in preparing this, rehearsing it, doing it as a work in progress, do you move toward Brecht to find something that might be essential to Brecht, or on the contrary, you move away from Brecht towards something that you discover, you search?
I think that one of those things leads to the other of those things. For me, the more I learn about something, the more I feel
you don't know it.
I don't know it. And therefore, I take chances in relation to material as I become both more familiar with it, and each piece of new information suggests most frequently not a solution but another question. So I go looking for another possibility.
I think I told you, I love this quip that comes from Lee Vucciolei, without whom I would not be here as a Guthrie, but his favorite quip is, there is not such a thing as originality. There is only lack of information.
Say it again.
There is not such a thing as originality. There is only lack of information. Now, that doesn't mean that everything that gets into a show is the result of repeating information. Because the other quip that goes in parallel is that in the theater, red and green never go together, except when they do.
Yes. And
David, in much of his work, I think that he attempts to prove the impossible, to find it. And whether this is with a script by Brecht or a script by Max Frisch or a script by Ionesco, I watched the video of your performance in the chairs. And it starts with something I was telling you about that, and I was intrigued. It starts with something that I've seen at the Walker several years back, like a retrospective of American dance theater, and it was a piece with the two of you with two folding chairs. And it's integrated in the chairs by Ionesco.
well, and the reason that that was there, in that I want to find a relationship to I saw the chairs when I was 19 years old in some basement theater in Greenwich Village for about $1.50. I had no reason to understand a single thing that was going on in that play, but I thought it was wonderful, and I came away haunted by the image, if nothing else, the image of this place filling up with these chairs, with this furniture. Time went by, and I saw various productions, and the one that I saw that caused me to go to work on this play was the very celebrated English production that came to Broadway. And Valda and I went to see it, and I hated it. I hated it because I couldn't find
any need to celebrate.
Reality. I couldn't find, it seemed to me it was intentionally comic. And I didn't think this play was intentionally comic. I thought this play was comic like life is comic at its worst. And I thought it was a play about two people who are growing old together and were finding out that we're trying to figure out what they still shared after all these years. And what was going to happen when nobody knew who they were, especially him. What was happening to him as he lost his identity, his reputation, and was going away. It seemed to me it was all about me. I thought it was all about me. So I went to work on making it be more about me. And one of the things I did was, it's a whole play about chairs. One of the things I became well known for in 1975, much against my will, was a bloody piece with 2 chairs in it, in which Valda and I danced with 2 metal folding chairs, and people wanted to call it a signature piece. And I didn't want to have a signature piece. I didn't want to have a signature. I didn't...
You mean you did not do what a famous movie, very well loved in the States and abroad, of Shakespeare in Love? Shakespeare was practically his signature in that movie. And this is what Shakespeare was a preoccupation for him. How I'm going to sign William Shakespeare?
Yes, I didn't want to do that. No, I didn't want to do that. In fact, at some point later on, I made a piece in which I wrote a trial, in which I was put on trial for refusing to have a signature piece, and the dancers testified against me in the trial because I made them talk on stage, and they were trained dancers, and somebody said in the course of it, how can we possibly recognize his signature piece if we can't read his handwriting? And my job in the world, it seems to me, was to do something else the next time that was not recognizable in relation to what I did the last time. And so that's how the chairs came to have that thing up at the top of it, 25 years later, or however long it was.
Brecht. When the tables of the law broke, so did all the vices. Even sleeping with one's sister is no fun anymore. Murder is too much trouble for many. Writing poems is too common. Since everything is too uncertain, many prefer to tell the truth, being ignorant of the danger of doing that.
Okay. Don't you just love that? I mean, what is there to say about it other than it says all the things that you think at various times as Are you aware of the fact that this rock star has beaten up this woman named Rihanna? And can you turn on the TV to CNN or any so-called serious news station? Since I've been here all week, I have rather limited cable in my hotel room. There is, in order to, I am using my remote to get away from Rihanna. I think the whole world is like what that says at this moment, and it is the thing that both makes me groan and laugh. And
try sports.
Sports. Well, except that sports has about it a kind of interior battle which seems to have a great deal to do with celebrity and a reputation. And the thing that is happening in sports is that if somebody is still playing who hasn't yet been carted off to prison for having shot himself in his thigh in a nightclub in his underwear, if that hasn't happened, well, it's a sort of miracle, it seems to me.
And then it can be news.
And then it can be the news as well, yes.
Now, let me ask you something which is related to your process or to your doing this work in progress. Do you call them work in progress because you believe in progress? Do you call them work in progress because that's a way to continue to keep digging deeper and finding out what you are searching for? Or is it related to the funding system?
There's the answer. It's related in part to the funding system, but I will tell you the most recent work in progress craziness has to do with the fact that we did the chairs. And the chairs, we worked very hard. We got a deficit because I had to buy 8,000 chairs. We performed in London at the Barbican, and we got very good press, and audiences grew by the night. We performed on the boards in Seattle, got very good press, and the audience built because nobody knew me there or why they should be coming to see us do this. And then we came to New York and we sold out the BAM Harvey for the Next Wave Festival for 4 performances, and they opened the second balcony, and everything was absolutely fabulous, and except the Charles Isherwood review said this wasn't as good as the English version, which is the very version that caused me to do this because I hated it so much. This wasn't as good as that one, he said, and we could not move it an inch further to any other theater or any other place. So we came away with the deficit attached to it, which we're still trying to get rid of. And these are the folding chairs, part of the same hundreds of folding chairs. And so when we started to work on the Roundheads and the Pointheads, and we got this date at the kitchen, I asked if we could please have it not be for review, so that I don't get killed by Charles Isherwood the second time out, so I can get it to go someplace else, so I can keep working on it. Because
That's what I call progress, not to have
that's my idea of progress.
Your piece, yes.
That's it. And so it has been really remarkable to keep being able to work on this as if one has the right to keep examining something and reimagining its life.
All right. There is something here that I misread in your first page. And it's funny how I misread it. I think it's funny. Let me find it. Uncivil Wars explores implication of READ, DRESSING. And me, reading it, misreading it, I didn't read it, of readdressing. I read it as of red/dressing. And Shakespeare was very fond of puns, and I am fond of puns, even though puns are considered the lowest kind of humor. What is it about readdressing matters when you do a work in progress? And do you see progress there, or you see only sort of digging deeper? I'm insisting on that because...
Yeah, digging deeper implies that I imagine that there's some mother lode down there. I'm not sure I dig deeper. I look over here and I look over here. I look at it that way. I just keep looking at it to see what it is the next time. And performers come to work with you, and they listen to the same words I wrote. When I write a script, when I first began to write something called a script, I put in all sorts of stage directions, pauses, dots. I tried to control how anybody was going to say anything. I very frequently still try to control things by every time I think a breath needs to be taken, I end the line and go on to the next line. I try very hard to be in control. But then what comes along are very creative actors who try very hard to stop me from being in control by taking control over what's going on. And that taking of control very frequently reinforms me about material I have thought I understood, but now I'm understanding somebody else's understanding of it, and that's coloring the next thing that happens. And I can then, if I can manage not to be so possessive and arrogant about my version of this, but to look at what somebody else is doing to my version of it, I in some way begin to have some other version or more than one version. And that becomes very interesting to me. So this, and I have to say about stuff that I have to write about things. There's a first draft of everything nobody sees except sometimes Elise and my son. In that draft, I make terrible jokes about everything I'm saying because everything else sounds like taking myself too seriously. And when I have finished making all those jokes, I begin editing for funders, fronts of objects, educational material, because people don't like jokes. They like you to be serious about what you're doing. So
one of the things that I love in the system, call it of funding or applying for funds or getting to do things, I love the fact that people rely on a description you give more than on the work you do.
Yes. Yes. That's the truth.
And this seems to me utterly obstaculating. Chule in something was talking about obstaculating, and no one understood what he was talking about. He found it was an obstacle in his way.
Yes.
And today I was reminded by the stage manager of that show, which was A Tempest in 1981, whenever it was, that Boyd Gaines, who is a rather respectable, appreciated, wonderful actor, was a young actor then. He played Ferdinand in The Tempest. And Chule, as he was coming in, Chule kept telling him, be more eccentric. And Boyd Gaines was going like that. No, Chule wanted him to be away from the center, eccentric. So, talking about work in progress, do you have another thing coming up the pipe, or you are going to continue to work on this to progress with it? Or you are going to see what the critic of the Star and Tribune will say about the show?
Let's just go to the next actual step.
Yes.
I cannot... we are filling out, at this moment, any number of grant applications. I can't keep asking for money for the same thing, although if I could, I would. I would say, now I'm really getting somewhere. Could somebody give me some money, please, so I could go further? But I can't do that. I have to name X number of other things that I will deal with, and I have to name them in such a way that the possibility exists that we could get some money, and the possibility exists that I could use that money in ways that would be useful. One of the things that has happened is, if I had a chance in the world, I would like to now... I came here to the Playwrights Center. I found a 7-page Brecht script called The Jewish Wife. They got 2 actors for me. I was able to spend a week here working on this script with the knowledge of what I had behind me and the Eric Bentley translation, which was so un-Brecht in a kind of way that I thought it was very interesting to work on. And if I had a choice in the world, I would like to go further. But nobody's going to hire me to do this, and nobody's going to give me the money to do this, so I am now sitting down this very morning making plans for some number of other projects. At some point, it seemed to me, as I was making my way from Shakespeare, Dancing Henry V, to Ionesco's The Chairs, to Aristophanes' The Birds, to this play, I thought I would like to go to 6 characters in search of... I would like to spend some time. I found a book of 1-act plays of various...
So you keep digging, in a sense, or exploring, or trying to meet something that will tick.
And be simultaneously personal and mysterious, and I can't find a way to get interested in something that sees itself or is known to be a drama or a tragedy, and I can't get to deal with... At some point, Theater for a New Audience very sweetly asked me to direct Comedy of Errors, and I read the script and said, okay, and then I read it 4 more times. And every time I read it, I thought, I don't know what to do with this. I have no idea.
You should do 2 Gentlemen of Verona.
No idea. So I eventually called up and said, I apologize, I can't do this. I mean, I can invent circumstances, do some sleight of hand, but I don't know why I'm doing it. I don't know what this means to me. So it has to go through some process in which I understand it in some other way,
Let's open up for questions, okay?
Hi, do you have questions?
Anyone wants to make a comment?
You have questions for him, because he has better answers.
I have answered to everything. I mean, what? That's why I'm a dramaturg.
Hi, Camille.
No, how is it for you now working with movement in this piece? I mean, even Henry V had quite a bit of movement. How is it not to have movement?
There's a 6-minute movement section that is happening right here with 30 people doing it. So there's a fair amount of movement. The real answer to your question is, once again, I apologize for not dealing with... I think that from the moment that scene one of whatever it is I'm doing happens, everything on the stage is moving. I build objects that all move. I hire people who can move and move them, and things are moving all the time. I was never very good at making dance steps with rond de jambes and tour en l'air.
But you did a pas de deux called the chairs.
Yeah.
I did a pas de deux called the chairs, which is not unlike things I've been doing for years and years. When the money comes from the dance department of the various funding organizations, the amount of movement shifts to more. When it comes from the theater department, it shifts
Toward words.
to more text. I'm a very practical fellow. I have to do what I have to do to survive. But my mind functions for the stage in terms of moving, speaking, sometimes singing, humans. And I think that the actors that I work with might tell you that they're moving a whole lot more around the stage than they perhaps expected to. And dancers will sometimes put me on trial for making them speak.
Anyone else? Go ahead, sir.
You spoke briefly about working in display, and was there some fragment of that that sort of, that in your mind, carries through the rest of the work?
Yes, actually, there a piece toured the country a little while ago. Mikhail Baryshnikov has a company called White Oak, and there was this thing called Past Forward, which had postmodern stuff in it, and I directed that. And one of the pieces in that was from a piece of mine, which used the music, the opening music of the ballet Bayadere, to introduce all the performers, while simultaneously in the touring version, Misha built an entire set in the middle of the stage, and when all the dancers left, they disassembled the set and took it away. Well, in the original version of that, in 19 whatever it was, I was the person doing that building of the set. And all of that coincided with the moment in my life in which I was trying to figure out the schizophrenia of earning a living, being a husband, being a father, being a dancer, being everything. So I sent out flyers to everybody to come and watch me do the windows of a store I was doing on 8th Street in New York, and an entire crowd assembled in the street, and I did my windows at 10 o'clock at night. And
So you did the windows before you did the chairs.
I did the windows. I did the windows before I did the chairs. Yes, indeed. And one of the things about learning to be in windows, to do store windows, is the window is a proscenium rectangle, like a stage. And if you are in the window doing whatever you're doing, you can teach yourself not to have to go outside to see what somebody else will see, but to understand by how you put it around yourself what people out there are seeing. And so when I first started doing it all to make a living, I had to go out many times. But eventually, I only had to go out twice. Once just before the end to check, and then determine if there were two things that needed to be moved, go back in, move them, close the window, and go away.
But it was a show in New York that I recall, because of what you are describing, that I saw. It was, I think it was in the garage, Elizabeth Locon's garage, and people were walking on the street in New York and were staring into the theater to see what was going on there.
Yeah.
Now we have a similar experience with the new rehearsal rooms at the Guthrie, where there is so much light, we can have them open, but sometimes we lift them from down up at a certain level, so people stare above them to see what's going on in rehearsal room. It's, for some bizarre reason, people are more interested in the rehearsal than they are interested in the completion of the show. People can ask questions. I'm baffled. Somebody asked me a question. I gave a very nasty answer, actually. And I was walking in when I heard this question. They wanted to know how many leaves in the Brian Freen's play, Home Place, were real and how many were attached. And my answer was, does it matter? And Sheila Livingston, who was moderating, and she's so good at keeping everything in the delicate balance, she said, if somebody is asking a question, it matters to this person. So let's give an answer. And the stage manager started giving the count. There are 2,000 leaves which are artificial attached to 6 which are still hanging in the real tree. Yes?
I'm just curious, have you ever encountered directors, traditional theater directors that have a dance background?
Yes, I have a colleague who would. But I think I'm lying in a way. Marcela Lorca, who is a Chilean, she is a dancer, choreographer. But I understand, if I'm not, perhaps I'm wrong on that, her father wanted her to be in the theater, and she wanted to be in the theater, and for some reason she couldn't get into the theater, so she became a choreographer. She found jobs as a dancer. And now Tuesday she starts rehearsing Caroline or Change. In the Tony Kushner Festival we're going to have. Any other questions or comments?
Do you think this may be your most political work?
Say that again?
Do you think that this on Civil Wars is your most political work?
I don't know.
Everybody
don't know
has
how
heard the question.
I don't know how anybody makes anything now anymore that doesn't in some way relate to political relations between humans, between humans. Forget about countries, wars, economies, just what anybody does to anybody else seems now to me to be political. I know for sure that I thought and said quoted in years gone by, I am not a political artist. And I think I was a fool. I think I was making political statements of various kinds a very long time ago without knowing I was doing it. And one of them was dancing with my own wife.
This reminds me of Molière. We were talking about Would-Be Gentleman, in which this guy who wants to become a gentleman in France, he's getting all kinds of teachers and instructors and people to help him to be a gentleman. And one of them is teaching him language, and he learns, to his astonishment, that there is prose and then there is verse. And at that point, he realized that his entire life, he spoke in prose. And I was telling David that for me, I don't know what this thing is, like we call in America dramaturgs. But my entire life I realized, just like Monsieur Jourdain, that I am a dramaturg. Whatever that is. I realize I am doing prose, but I have friends and colleagues who try to convince me that this is a wrong statement to make. Because there is a specialty, and you can prove that you are a specialist, and you can prove that you are expert and competent, and then it makes sense. And there is some funding, possibly. Yes?
Can you talk about the other artists who work with you in this piece?
Yes, that's a very good question. I want to expand it a little bit, because this is a pick-up company, but how did you pick them up?
Very luckily, I picked up Valda Setterfield about 50 years ago. And we fight furiously during rehearsal, and yet we manage to stay together. And she informs the things I do in very important ways. All these other people over here, useless.
They're just guns for hire, right?
Gina, the woman sitting at the end there, who is the music director and plays a number of instruments and knows a great deal about Brecht and associate composers and his associate composers, and has a band which deals directly with that musical material, has been enormously important in the process of dealing with this. We met having been commissioned to write a new musical for ACT in San Francisco, and then we both got dumped unceremoniously at the end of it, at the end of having written it. And we found each other again in relation to this project. And in the first year of working together on it, I think we made each other extremely miserable. And this time around, we're having a much better time. And that, in part, has to do, I think, with the fact that it's the second year, not the first. And Ed Fitzgerald there has been my stage manager for a many number of years. And Norma Fire and I went to college together, and she was in the first dance I ever made at Brooklyn College. And John Kelly, I know in New York as a performer, as an artist for many years, and he was in last year's version of this. And David and Davis, who are those two guys, are brand new to me and really remarkable, and have informed this material in ways. They're part of what I was talking about when people you don't know are looking at the thing that you know very well and changing it by virtue of their intelligence and their talent. And over there is Elise, who has been connected to my work and my company for 20-something years and takes care of my son's work and my work and much of her own work. And sitting next to her is Sarah, who has just become the company manager. And I don't know how we would have survived this last 4 weeks at Skidmore and on our way here without Sarah. And people come into your life, and you're very lucky that they do, and they make things happen. And I'm not always good about any of it. I am. John is very jealous of my hair. He says I have a really good head of hair, and I do.
So
it comes from my father. My father had this hair, and his father had this hair, and what they both had as well, and I have, is fury. They were the angriest people in the world, and now I am the angriest person because they're both gone. And so all these people who you see here, who make my life wonderful, even though I am the angriest person they ever met.
And let's get back for the ending here to Shakespeare. To Brecht, who's saying, what do people still expect of me? I have played all the patiences, spat out all the kirsch, stuffed all the books into the stove, loved all the women till they sank like Leviathan. Truly I'm a great saint. My ear is so rotten it will soon drop off. So why is there no peace? Why do people stand in the yard like rubbish bins, waiting for something to be put into them? Thank you.
Hear, hear, Brecht. Thank you all. Good night.